Hello, it is another Tuesday, and of course that means it's time for another in real life video. And apologies as well, we skipped last week's, but this week we are tackling something, once again, very topical. We alluded to it before in the past. Those big layoffs that we heard about, those like apocalyptic sort of bloodbath layoffs have finally arrived. Microsoft has let loose the locusts of the end times, or at the very least it feels like it from here. And as well, it's worth bearing in mind that throughout all that we talk about here today and all that you've been hearing about, if you keep your ear to the ground, this probably is not the first you've heard this talked about, but this is only half of it. Right? I believe it's over the course of the next year or half year. The other half is going to slowly start to roll out. So if this didn't seem bad enough, it's going to be double what happened yesterday, which was, I believe, 16,000 people. And there's going to be 16,000 more roles being completely wiped out, torched, obliterated. Jobs, right? People taken out. Up to, or it should be 3,200 people in total is what we've heard. Maybe the wildest part of the fact that it's been split into halves is that nobody really knows who's in the other half, right? If you're in, like, for instance, a studio that got bought out or has spun off into being independent once more, like Double Fine or Undead Labs, they are probably not included in this number, but of the remaining folks who are still holding out, who knows, right? Who knows what's going to happen within the next year? Really cool, very cool to do that to people. Very cool to have, like, the status of your livelihood sort of put on such, like, rickety bearings. Very cool to expect creative work from these people in a time, right? Whether or not you're impacted, really cool to expect people to be working under these conditions when they don't know whether, like, a coworker, a friend may be getting axed. They themselves may be up on the chopping block next. Who can say? Who can say? What a joy! How god awful. Nonetheless, as we alluded to, some of these studios that got axed, they have been able to successfully spin off into their own thing, thank goodness. That being, like, the legendary Double Fine, which we talked about. Also ones that got bought out by, like, a mysterious benefactor of some sort. One of my personal favorites, like I brought up, Undead Labs, who are still hammering away at State of Decay 3. I really enjoy State of Decay 2, and when I played it a few years ago, I really enjoyed it, and I generally enjoy Undead Labs as a studio. So I'm glad that they're being bought out in some capacity. Hopefully it's not out of the frying pan and into the fire, but it remains to be seen. I guess at the very least, it's, if we take, like, a worker-centric, pragmatic approach to the whole situation, at the very least, it's comforting to know that for these people, their, like, livelihood isn't as in immediate danger, right? They still have, like, the means to live. And if they're supporting, like, friends or family or loved ones in some capacity with their work or benefits, at least that is liable to remain in some form, maybe not to the same degree that they're accustomed to, but in some form. And this isn't to say to hand Microsoft their flowers at all. If anything, I personally don't think you should be giving Microsoft the leadership any type of flowers or any inch of grace whatsoever. I think this is completely, like, a monumental failure on their behalf, which we've talked about before. Not just the newest, like, figurehead at Xbox, but so too past ones, right? Not just Asha Sharma is this at the feet of, who is sort of, like, taking on this role of being like I heard it referred to as being the pain sponge, right? I think taken from Succession, right? Bless up to Tom Wamscans. But nonetheless, there to sort of just absorb damage, take blows, smile in front of the camera, deliver PR, as the company goes under like absurd amounts of change, right? And like catastrophic change. Like I believe they were on record saying that they're going to do a reset, which is a very wild thing to say, to treat it so glibly. This this entire situation where like a bunch of people's livelihoods are involved, right? Super wild to use that sort of nomenclature, I feel. But yeah. Of course, this also goes further up the ladder to folks like Satya Nadella, who has, you know, at no point in time decided to, let's maybe stop funneling and dumping loads and loads of money into developing artificial intelligence, or AI as we know it, LLMs. Their Azure, which is still being used for like horrors within war, right? Still being used to commit like horrible fucking atrocities. Also on a more like domestic level rather than like international, like global warfare, on more locally, Copilot, which even among people who are like weird deviant freaks who are still clinging on to AI as something that they love, when it seems as if opinion on AI is really rapidly dwindling, especially as more and more people are forced to reconcile and like deal with, oh, they're going to build a data center, right? What does that entail? What sort of impact is that going to have on like my bills, on the local ecosystem, on my quality of life when I go outside? What's that going to be like? A lot of people are realizing, oh my God, this sucks. This is so horrible. We're doing all of this just so people can, just so grandma can generate another stupid little video of cats wearing diapers on on Facebook, right? What a damn mess. What a damn mess. Nonetheless, it also goes further back in time. I think some of this blame to former figurehead, what's his name? Phil Spencer. I think some of that also falls at his feet, and he's because of it, he got axed, though not without a golden parachute, right? This is like a story that we've heard long before, when it came to Bobby Kotick of Activision Blizzard and his sort of like entire realm of nightmares and his whole situation where he's a complete asshole. But you know, when you get sort of severed or let go of when you're in a position like that, you get a lot more runway than, for instance, some of the people who were recently impacted by these layoffs, some of the people who will be impacted by these layoffs. It's just a hellish situation. So of note, a lot of places got impacted, even some that people thought were maybe safe, even ones that were not just completely chopped and spun off. For instance, there were, you know, there was just no shortage of folks who I saw posting about just how long they had worked at some of these studios, which a lot of these studios that were impacted were, as is evident, in some ways like a gold standard of what was previously, under previous leadership, possible within the games industry. People who had worked under a studio, whether that be doing like coding, developing like art, doing design on some level, doing just testing, even people running the back end, like running like cybersecurity or interfacing with the community, stuff like that. All important stuff, important in putting together a game in the modern day of a large size, right? In running like a game development studio. All important in their own ways. But a lot of them were present at these studios, working in different roles or working in even very similar roles for 5, 10, 15, even 20 years. I saw, I believe, at minimum 3 people who had worked at some of these impacted studios for 20 years. Others who came very close, who were like between 15 and 20, countless more from like 5 years and on, which of course isn't even to say that the fresh blood, so to speak, wasn't also vital to the entire situation, that we shouldn't also be in some ways mourning the losses of them as well. But this is getting at something that a lot of folks will be talking about. I've already heard some folks talk about. I think I heard, if you haven't yet followed him here on YouTube, Jason Schreier, a sort of infamous leaker of the of the plot of Fallout 4, who got blacklisted because of it. But super well informed individual when it comes to video games, well spoken. Jason Schreier mentioned brain drain, right? Which is the concept of sort of when you have people working anywhere, not just in video game studios, not just even in white collar work, like behind a damn desk, but anywhere doing anything, right? It's sort of like the human nature. Come on, we play Elder Scrolls games, right? We know what it's like to develop a damn skill from like 15 to 100. But this sort of brain drain wherein you have veteran employees who have been there for literal decades, who have some sort of, within the studio, within the company, like institutional knowledge of what's going on and other people that they are familiar with, wherein it becomes easier to just work with people who you're familiar with. It becomes easier to work with like software that you're more familiar with because you've been, although the engine has changed and updated X or Y amount of times over the course of those decades, you've been with it all along the way. You don't have to have like an onboarding learning curve, right? And if anything, you work to ease the onboarding, the learning curve for new people, right? It helps new blood come in and be more prepared for the task at hand. We are losing people like that from all of these studios. Like I said, I even brought up here, let me see. Yeah, there was an art director at Obsidian, worked for 21 years, got cut. Absolutely wild. The 7 years on here, the lead quest designer at Bethesda Game Studios working on Fallout 76, got completely wiped out. Let me see here. Someone who worked for over 20 years at IdTech, also really wild. They wiped out a lot of software engineers at the legendary IdTech, sort of renowned for their back-end engine stuff. Just completely wiped them out. I believe it was, let me double check here. Yeah, roughly half of IdTech, the folks who make, in recent times, Doom, they got wiped out. And the rest of them, what are they doing? What will be the plan for that? I have no idea. How do you make another Doom game with half the people? You probably don't, right? You probably don't. You probably are being like rolled up into a different team to do something else. Is my best guess. Same goes for Obsidian. I believe Obsidian had roughly 25% of its workers just wiped out. And that can, sure, maybe you didn't like newer offerings from Obsidian, right? We've talked about this before. But I do think that if we want to treat video games as art, you should be afforded, especially when you're underneath a banner such as Microsoft, you should be afforded the ability to like mess up, you know? And that was sort of the modus operandi for a bit, like wherein, yeah, you could put out a stinker, but then you would like get back out there and go to work on something else, right? You would continue the iterative process. But clearly that is not the case here. And in fact, even folks who worked on games that were, for the amount of investment required, the ROI was good and the acclaim was stellar. For instance, I saw that someone who contributed artwork to the wonderful Pentiment got axed. They contributed a fair amount of like the 2D art used in that game, no longer working at Obsidian. Absolute travesty, I think. Even beyond there, I think, have some empathy within our hearts for, even if you didn't like something like Avowed, which I liked, or something like The Outer Worlds 2, I still think there should be room for those folks to, like, we have to contend, how much are we deciding, like, we're making a product versus we're making art? Do we just want to decide, like, these are products, it's not art? The bottom line is more important than, like, the creative process, right? I think we're running into an issue where Microsoft is very, very much doesn't position itself as a company that thinks it makes art, but perhaps formerly, under other, like, leadership, whether it be Obsidian being independent some odd years ago, or various ZeniMax studios, including Bethesda, but not limited to, being run under their own, like, banner of ZeniMax, sort of having a bit more care toward the artistic end of it. I believe there was the continued story of ZeniMax's former CEO, who tragically died about a year after he sold all of ZeniMax to Microsoft, when that seemed a lot more, like, rosy, right? But, you can totally see a situation in which he thought that he was doing the right thing for his people. But regardless, before then, ESO, Elder Scrolls Online, which got completely gutted, by the way, its team completely carved up, from community managers to back end to people, like, doing creative work that you immediately interface with in the game, got completely wiped out by this. I have no idea what the fate will be of that studio and what they will do going forward with ESO, aside from just keeping it on effectively life support. But regardless, it's no big surprise, or it's no big secret, that when that game initially came out, it was very rocky. It was very rocky, and there's a lot of stories in, like, interviews and documentaries made by folks like NoClip and all of that, who have talked to these developers, people working at these studios, that the former CEO, Robert Altman, not the famous actor, but, like, a different one, he married a famous actress, what's her name? Wonder Woman from back in the day, right? Linda Carter. But I guess, I guess go figure, marrying an actress, you come to have some appreciation for the arts. Nonetheless, he let go on, he let continue the work on ESO until it got to where it needed to be. And it started, like, it wasn't like World of Warcraft levels of popularity, right? But it got to a point where it was being sustainable. It was doing well. It was a force unto itself, right? He sort of gave it that time and effort and all of that. But like I said, tragically, the guy passed away. I believe, like I said, it was about a year after the sale to Microsoft went through, or was it a year before? I forget exactly. But nonetheless, you can even see him. He's part of the special thanks in at the end of the credits for, or at the beginning of the credits for Starfield. You can see that's the guy. That's who Rob is. It is the former CEO that people thought was, like, one of these shining examples of what you could be. Not a perfect individual, but certainly by CEO standards, very good, very well regarded by a lot of the people working under him. Not unlike, what's his name? Iwata over at Nintendo, right? You always hear good things said about that guy. Nonetheless, bad things have happened here, right? Very, very, very bad things have happened here. I do also, in speaking of the past, let's also look a bit to the future. They've said that with this, they want to focus on their biggest franchises, right? This is sort of the reset, the restructuring, where in the past, Microsoft took a very hands-off approach. They're getting a lot more hands-on. As I alluded to with id, I assume that a lot of the people still at id are going to in some way be rolled up into or like made to work on other games. We already know that in the past, folks at id did offer help and work on stuff for Bethesda Game Studios when it came to Fallout 4, and I believe also Fallout 76. I know that for a fact, that they're doing that. I want to say I heard that also folks at Machine Games, folks who do Wolfenstein, and Indiana Jones, that they also contributed to Fallout. Same goes for, you know what, I'm more rocky on that, never mind. But regardless, is it now safe to assume that they are now like, they're not working on Doom, right? Like, we have heard publicly that Doom and Wolfenstein are one of those major franchises that they do want to continue focus on. And yet, how do we say this like, how do we say this to the public facing PR statements and all of that when we know for a fact that, like, you just chopped their dev studio in half, right? Like, what are we saying? How are we expecting that they're going to put out another Doom with half the amount of people, right? You want them to do it faster and better with half as many folks? Are we for real? What do you mean? What does that mean? In some ways, I anticipate that maybe they get rolled into, like I said, contributing more to other things, like another Elder Scrolls, like another Fallout, something along those lines. There are also weird omissions from all of these talks. We just brought up the new Indiana Jones game, which was very critically well received. A lot of people enjoyed that, from courtesy of Machine Games, Wolfenstein folks. We did not hear them mention that. Are they going to not do any more Indiana Jones stuff? As far as I have heard, there was a tease at like future games in this like series or whatever. Are those just not going to happen? Because those were definitely not mentioned in any of those PR statements. Same goes for other oddities as well. Obviously this isn't from like the ZeniMax. This isn't within the purview of like ZeniMax. So we didn't get information from like ZeniMax leadership, which I think is Jill something beginning with the letter B. I forget her name. But regardless, she put out a statement saying that, like, yeah, we're going to try and we're refocusing a lot of our resources and efforts on these games, on these franchises. This is orders from on high, from Microsoft, from Xbox and Microsoft, and thus they're reconfiguring in that way. How about other games as well that were not part of that buyout, that were not originally part of that studio or that like conglomeration of studios? How about folks working on like Fable? I found it so weird that throughout all of this, we know that there is a Fable game coming out. It got delayed to next year, presumptively to get out of the way of GTA. What's going to happen to Fable? What's going to happen to all the people working at Playground Games? Because also, interestingly, missing from these statements are things about Playground Games and their more popular, more well-known games, Forza, right? They've long since been making Forza games, whether they be the like more serious ones or the ones that are a lot more arcadey, like Forza Horizon and all of that. Those are pretty well enjoyed. As far as I know, they've been doing quite well for like driving racing games and all of that. What's going to happen to them? That's very odd that that we didn't seem to hear anything about them in PR. There's other instances of this as well. There's like Gears of War is getting a new game, the E-Day one or whatever. I'm very unfamiliar with Gears of War. Apologies. So much love for the people at these studios. Very little love for Microsoft, upper echelons of Microsoft and all of that, of course. But apologies, my expertise is more so within the realm of role-playing games. But the Gears of War folks, they've got a new game coming out within 365 days, is my understanding. The Gears of War E-Day or whatever, they were not mentioned in any of this. Are they also on this like chopping block wherein the other half that we have heard of, this mysterious other half of like all the layoffs, are are those all going to be studios that are currently working on games right now that are due out within the next 365 days? Is this going to be like Playground Games and Fable? Is this going to be the Coalition? Is that the people who make Gears of War? The Coalition and Gears of War E-Day? Is it going to be In Exile? Folks may know In Exile. If you enjoyed Wasteland 2 or 3, or have been looking forward to Clockwork Revolution, or you're all familiar with Brian Fargo, who heads In Exile, right? The same Brian Fargo who is one of the like original folks who made Fallout, right? They bought them up. Now, what's going to happen to them after Clockwork Revolution comes out? Because I guess it's safe to assume that something like Clockwork Revolution isn't going to be seeing a sequel anytime soon, barring it having like an astonishing success at launch. What's really odd to me is stuff like Gears of War and Fable, and to a lesser degree Forza, because they're in the works. Like, what's going to happen with those? Right? There's so much up in the air. So imagine like the degree of confusion and wonder that we have right here. And then imagine as if you were working on those games and you're like, what's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to the person I work next door to? Right? What's going to happen to all of us when this is done? Are we next? When we get this out the door, are we just working to our grave here effectively? Very wild stuff. Absolutely terrible, right? Atrocious situation. And of course, an atrocious video games industry to suddenly find yourself laid off and unemployed in, right? Even like, I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't Microsoft tend to have, when they lay people off, they tend to have pretty decent severance packages. But regardless, even in light of that, the video games industry is not doing great right now, in the sense that there's it's not exactly rife with job opportunities, especially considering a lot of the, like we said at the start of this, a lot of the like gold standards that existed in the past that were like, oh, this is an amazing studio that is often like a decent place to work and like lay your hat down or whatever, right? If you want to get into games, you know, for the longest time, it was Bethesda Game Studios was one of those where they have so many like long-standing employees who have been working at those games since Morrowind, since Oblivion, since Skyrim, which is now a long ways away, right? Truly wild to see this, and truly going to suck with the degree of brain drain, like we've talked about, that we will see going on in the future. And very weird to expect so much from teams that are like completely gutting all of these veteran developers, right? Just completely wiping them out. It's so wild. It will be wild to see what happens at all. It's one heck of a situation. I've seen people say like, well, maybe they'll just go independent or whatever, or like I said, they'll get bought out, or these developers, as they're laid off, they'll find homes elsewhere. I don't think that's going to really happen in the vast majority of cases. I think more often the brain drain is going to occur, right? These people are going to find work elsewhere. It's sort of like notorious that the games industry is, for its skill set, oftentimes fairly low paying compared to other places, right? Cybersecurity is a huge one, wherein you could go run cybersecurity for like, I don't know, Walmart's back end, right? Something like that. And sure, it's not an illustrious line of work or whatever. However, it's reliable and it pays a hell of a lot better than doing game dev, right? A lot of these folks who were in it for this long were also, you know, a lot of these, even the new folks, were in it for the love of the game, you know, for the love of the games. It's just a nightmarish situation all around. I think a lot of these people are going to go down different career paths or like make great swerves into adjacent paths. wherein we're just going to completely lose out on that degree of expertise because, like I said, good luck spinning off and doing your own thing. It's never been more difficult, I think, to get noticed and to start your own thing. You know, how many have we seen come and go where games just like immediately like self-immolate on launch for one reason or the other? It's so difficult right now. I don't doubt that we will hear at least a few success stories, right? I can't help but think of around the launch of Cyberpunk 2077, that was so disastrous. CD Projekt Red was smashed with huge amounts of layoffs. Even leading up to that, what a smack in the face, because they were like, they all were beholden to like just inhumane levels of crunch to get that game out the front door in the state that it got out the front door in. But a lot of the former developers are now getting ready to ship a game that looks like it's going to be pretty dope, Blood of the Dawnwalker. However, like I said, I don't think everybody who got laid off here, because especially considering the numbers, like it's only halfway done. Not everybody's going to go on to make something like Blood of the Dawnwalker, even if they want to try to do it, because it's just so difficult to make a game right now and to have it be sold and like have interest garnered in it. It seems really tough. In spite of all of that, I think it's easy to get very doom and gloom about like the games industry. I know some folks, when faced with stuff like this, talk about like, is the video game industry going to crash, right? Similar to how it did in the 80s. I don't think that's going to happen. I think video games are now too complex, right? The business of video games is now too complex and too interwoven and too multifaceted to perhaps ever fail in the way that it did, or at least come close to failing in the way that it did. I don't think it will happen. It can get worse, right? It can get so much worse where there's only like super major, super massive hits and the occasional like wild indie that blows up completely out of nowhere. Like in recent days, Mecha Chameleon absolutely blew up. But for the vast majority of folks, it's just not going to happen. And I think a lot of people are going to see that writing on the wall and be like, well, I have kids. I have a husband or wife. I have a parent who is in like medical need or whatever. I need work. Right? It's not exactly like, you know, I don't know, look around, dude. It's not exactly like the rest of the world is getting easier to live in, financially speaking, or climately speaking, at the very least as well. It's tough times. It's tough times, and I think you're going to see a lot of people be like, well, shoot, it's not glamorous. It's not as fun. It doesn't engage me the same way, and I don't enjoy it the same way that I did working with that team back at Game Studio X or Y, but it puts food on the table, you know? It makes sure that my family has, like, health insurance benefits and all of that. It's just the reality of the situation. It's grim. it's a little bad. But alas, I would be surprised if like some of the major tentpoles and stuff don't continue to like pull in numbers, right? Like Grand Theft Auto 6 is on the way. You know, I imagine it will be some sort of bittersweet, twisted irony when it sells a million gajillion copies. Meanwhile, the rest of the games industry is on fire, and they're also playing a major role in killing physical media, right? It's gonna be wild. It's gonna be wild. We're just gonna have to weather the storm if we possibly can, right? And there's also issues of like wherein we talked about like getting sales on games. It's getting harder to sell games now from a previously unexplored vector, wherein it's becoming more expensive to be interested in video games, to play video games, because hardware prices are going through the damn roof. And you folks, if I told you why hardware prices are going so high, Man, we've come full circle, huh? It's because of AI. It's because of these damn LLMs. A stick of RAM is going through the roof. You want to upgrade your SSD? Oh my goodness, don't even think about it right now, buddy. It's never been worse. Have you seen the prices of the Steam machine? Have you seen that they're going to be raising console prices? This is like the first generation in a long time where the prices have gone up. Maybe it actually, is it the first time ever where they've like steadily gone up, right? First it was tariffs. Now it's like, because AI data centers are buying out all the damn hardware to a degree to where, they're actually like pre-ordering it ahead of time, right? They've got like orders in to get all these damn chips just for the data centers, man. Oh, dude, it's some shonky business. It's some shonky business. I'm sure we'll see stuff that's where video games are perhaps more keen on not looking super amazing, right? Not trying to push the limits of hardware and all of that, and maybe dialing it back a little bit, you know, even beyond the indie space. I'd be very curious about that. Or is it that AAA can only exist in this somewhat cutting edge area? I don't know. It's a mess. It'll be interesting to watch, I guess. It'll be interesting to watch and live through. All right. Well, I guess that'll do it for this one. Look forward to twice another amount of layoffs equal to this, except spread out, right? Expect more to come. We already know it's going to happen. When's it going to come? Who's going to be in it? Who can say? What an exciting time. God, it's awful. All right. Until next time, please take care of each other.